still have my old area, which is the Pico Robertson area, but I just got a message on my phone that they have got a new senior lead for the area, so then I can devote 100% attention to Brentwood area, which is a lot better for me because splitting 2 areas, it's a little overwhelming with the emails and phone calls. So now I can just focus on the Brentwood area, which I'm excited about. So.
And yesterday afternoon at 5 o'clock, Rick received an email from our guest speaker who was going to talk about earthquake, and she could not come because Mayor Garcetti had put all staff on call to him. So we were in a state of panic, but she recommended that our new senior lead officer could do it. So we emailed him, tracked him down, and he's with us, and we are very, very indebted to you for coming.
I'll do my best. I'm not Jackie, but this is her. I've been to Jackie. We did a RYLAN meeting, one of the first ones on Gretna Green, where we had 3 neighborhood groups that were 3 individual RYLAN groups that we all met at one house and started to organize that. So let me start by RYLAN is basically Ready Your LA Neighborhood. And basically, to put it simply, what RYLAN is basically mainly for West LA, it'd be an earthquake or say a major fire. It's that first hour within when the occurrence happens that the police and fire are going to be overwhelmed with everything. So the chances of them getting out to wherever you live, whether it's the top of Mandeville, or if you're not the epicenter of where it happens, they're going to put the resources where they're needed the most. So there's going to be all these streets and neighborhoods where police and fire may not get to you for a day, 2 days. So what the RYLAN is basically putting together small groups of around 10 to 15 houses, or if you're in a condo building, you know, it could be, they go by, say if it's a condo complex of 50 units, they might break that up into 3 different segments, and each one of those is a RYLAN group. And basically what it is you get, let's use the example of 10 residential homes. Those 10 people would contact Jackie. When they get a group of 10 to 15 houses together, they'll contact Jackie. She'll go out and give the RYLAN material, and it's basically organizing the neighborhood into, you know, I'm trying to, like, everybody has their own expertise, whether maybe one person at one residence, a structural engineer, the next house is a doctor, the next house is a, well, not here, would be a fireman living in Brentwood unless he's doing something funny. But basically everybody's got their own expertise, and also it's knowing who's in each house. So some people, when there was the fire in Bel Air a couple years ago, we went to houses and a lot of those residents knew that there was an elderly couple in their late 90s way up at the top of the canyon, and they knew that they were still up there at that time. But because these people were organized, this wasn't even the RYLAN yet. This was people knowing where their close proximity neighbors, the issues that some of them had, whether they had little kids that needed to be picked up at school, if there's elderly people, people with special needs, people that need medication that don't have a car to get the medication. It's basically getting to know, it's almost, I like to equate it to a neighborhood watch group, where you know where your neighbor 3 houses down is going to be out of the country for 2 months, and you know what people are there looking after the houses. It's basically like that, but for a disaster. So when you do these meetings, basically there's a form that Jackie would bring out there, and it breaks each household up, and everybody puts their name, you know, if they have any expertises, if they have any equipment, like people have generators, people have, maybe they have a stockpile of food. These days it seems like everybody's stockpiling toilet paper, so, you know, stuff like that. So you know if you needed a supply or something from your group of 10 to 15 people, you could rely on certain people for certain things, and other groups might designate different people for specific, you know, attributes during a time of a disaster.
So let me ask, are we more at risk in terms of a fire, given what's happened last year than we are an earthquake? Or what would you suggest that Brentwood Park do to be better prepared than we were last year?
The main thing would be communication, and just what we tell people is make sure you can take care of yourself and your household first, because if you can't take care of your household and yourself, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. So we start within the home. Make sure you have the proper amount of, say, water, supplies, food, emergency preparedness kits, all that stuff in your own home. That way you guys are self-contained and can take care of yourself, and then when other people in your RYLAN group need help, you can go out and assist the other people in your group. It's kind of like on the plane when they say put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help others, because you're no good if you pass out without that oxygen mask. That's kind of how the RYLAN thing is making sure first yourself and your family's taken care of, and then you're able to assist others and coordinate within your group to assist everybody there. And basically, I can't get into the real details because that's Jackie's expertise, but they also have, when you have the RYLAN meeting at your house, you have, I believe it's like a green and a red, it's kind of a card, and what you do is you put that on your house. So if they know where the RYLAN groups are in neighborhoods, they can go through the emergency response. If they see a green sign on the door, they know that they don't have to worry about that residence. If they see a red, that means somebody in the house obviously is has the RYLAN set up, but they're having an emergency at their house and they need, you know, police or fire to get to that house. So there's little things like that. A lot of people in one of the groups, the RYLAN groups we went to, was they were CERT. I don't know if anybody's here, the CERT groups, the people that go out and get emergency preparedness. They learn how to, use fire extinguishers, what to do in case of an earthquake. They're kind of an assistant to the police and fire when there's a major incident. They go out, and it's not the same as RYLAN. They get individually trained. I believe they have a training going on. I want to say there's a current one going on. I was just at a meeting and the lady there told me they have one going on, I believe Wednesdays at Kenter Elementary School. It's for the next, I don't know how many weeks. You could go online and look at CERT for that. That's something separate from this, but people that are CERT qualified are big assistants when it comes to RYLAN, especially in their neighborhood. They really help out with the RYLAN stuff. So I think I jumped from your question, but fire would be the #1 thing, especially if you're up in the hilly areas. That's going to be most likely to happen versus an earthquake. They keep saying we're due for a big earthquake coming up, but I'm hoping that they're wrong on that and it won't happen for 100 years, because I remember when the Northridge earthquake happened, everybody came to my parents' house. I don't know why they thought my dad was like the superhero, but we had like 20 family members show up from all different areas of the valley. They came to our house. I don't know why. So my dad was kind of, I guess he was the early RYLAN coordinator for all the relatives. So it's just getting familiar with what you would do and how the organization of your neighborhoods would go. That's the biggest thing, knowing who's at each residence and how they can assist, and checking on the 10 to 15 households that are in your RYLAN group. It's just locking down your neighborhood and making sure, okay, we're okay, we have no issues. Then if a neighbor needs assistance, you're going to be able to help them out, and it makes it easier for police and fire to know that, you know, this neighborhood they're taken care of right now. We can move on to a neighborhood that's maybe not as prepared and focus our attention there. So I don't have all the PowerPoint that Jackie does, but I don't know if people have questions. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. I do have her business card up here. So what she always says is, if in whatever neighborhood you're in, if you could get, she likes between 10 is kind of the good number she likes. 15 if it's a condo complex and there's multiple units in the building. You could go up to 15, but if you start going beyond that number of people, it starts getting diluted and it's not as close-knit of a small community that you could really work with and get to know who everybody is. When you start getting outside that number of 15, it just gets too, it just too diluted and you don't get to know the people that well. So,
Are there any questions?
does anybody, they probably have a lot of questions with the amount of information I just gave you. Yes?
My wife and I were at the at one of Jackie's meetings.
Okay.
Where she gave a presentation. You've done very well, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Along with that, there were people who were selling preparedness kits and that sort of thing. Is that something that follows her every time? Or was that just a coincidence?
I think that was just at that. I don't know which. Do you remember what?
Oh, it's up at St. Martin's.
Okay, that could have been somebody there. That's a big business with their emergency preparedness kits. You know, I can't tell you which one's better than the other, but the main things I always say is, well, obviously lots of water. I tell people if you're backed up to the mountains, because I've spoken to firemen and I've seen this when we were up in the Bel Air fires, is the people that have large swimming pools, they have these large generators that can pump the water directly out of the pool onto the hillside with, I think it's a 2-inch diameter hose, which is a lot bigger than a fire or a garden hose, but it's manageable for an average adult to handle that, and it will put down a lot more water than a fire hose. And I know that's one of the big things. If you have a pool, and even if you don't live right by the mountainside, you could use that, test it every couple months, make sure it's up and running. The generators, you know, you could pump the water out of your pool. And we were at houses where some of the residents had sprayed down their whole house, and the fire department said it did make a significant difference. When an ember spark lands on the house, if it's dripping wet, it makes a big difference. So, but those emergency kits, I'm not familiar that they always go when Jackie's there. I think it just happened to happen when you were there. But if you're gonna buy stuff, just really research where you're getting it from and make sure you can go on websites, and you know, fire probably has a website where you can go and it has what the most important things are to have, because they'll start selling stuff with crazy stuff in it that you don't really need, and then the price starts going through the roof. And some people, I think, are just trying to take advantage of situations, especially when they know there's been fires in certain areas and small earthquakes. They take advantage of that stuff.
We learned a couple of things about that were a surprise to us. That some of the food that's available that way is only good for 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice, but so you want to make sure that what you're buying really will last a long time. And the second thing we learned is that a lot of it is not designed to be stored outdoors. That it needs to be in the house.
Cool, shaded place.
A nice little box outside where we thought we would keep it all.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
And a lot of that stuff is questionable. It's like a brick and you mix it with water. It's not, you could almost go to the grocery store and just find a canned food that will have a 3 to 4 shelf life, and it only costs $1.50 a can. And if you had 30, 40 cans, you could eat that and keep yourself where you needed to be till you're able to go to the store and things have calmed down. So a lot of stuff you could kind of piece together on your own, and you may save a lot of money. It might be a little more inconvenient, but you know what's actually in there instead of opening up a bucket and finding a bunch of stuff with dead batteries and all kinds of stuff.
I have a question about evacuations, because sometimes they talk about evacuating. I cannot imagine trying to evacuate on the 405.
Yeah, that's one of the issues we had with the fire at the Getty Center was all these side streets. And when that happened, I got in the morning, I went straight up to Mount St. Mary's, and there was they have a dormitory for the retired nuns, and a lot of these women there was a couple ladies that were 104, so they were they were supposed to stay in place there, so I basically was there for 17 hours. If the fire did get bad enough that was going to overtake the building, there was, I believe, 7 officers, and they had a bunch of fire trucks up there, and we were discussing how we would get these ladies out of the, you know, the area. So, and a lot of streets were closed, and it's, for us, it's, the difficulty is communication between the fire department and police department is good, but then when they need to get big equipment up there, and we have some streets that there's a couple different ways to get in. Some of it was blocked off, but we didn't have the manpower to cut everything off, and so it got very convoluted in where people needed to go and where they could go and the best way to get out. So that's one of the things I know police and fire are working on, is trying to make sure that when, you know, it's chaotic in the beginning, but we need to have routes to get out of the area. I know a lot of it was going west on Sunset Boulevard and San Vicente down to the coast and getting out that way. The 405, as everybody knows, the traffic's terrible. I would suggest staying away from that unless that was the only avenue to get away from it. If it was in the west and was working its way east, then maybe that's your only option. But it does get chaotic, especially with the fires up Mandeville Canyon. The fires, when they're up there, there's limited ways to get out, and everybody obviously wants to get out. And then sometimes people hear, oh, you're sheltering in place, so people are like, do I shelter in place? Do I evacuate? And all that is, the fire department is for the fires, obviously, they're the ones telling us, hey, they'll get with our captain and say, well, we need this whole area on the map, we need all that evacuated. So then they have the police department go in and start evacuating everybody. And then, you know, you're door knocking houses and telling people they need to go, and then nobody answers. But then the neighbor's saying, yeah, there's a lady that lives there. I remember one lady was deaf, so we had to go around the back of the door, get into the house, and sure enough, she was sitting there a little frazzled, didn't know what was going on, but she was deaf, so we were able to get her out, notified her family that we did get her out of there. So there's a lot of moving parts with evacuation and sheltering in place, but everything we do is dictated by the fire department, and we try and facilitate what they need from us. So
Well, we appreciate what you do.
thank you. We try. Yes.
Separate from emergency situations,
Uh-huh.
just on a normal night like tonight, what is the police department coverage of this area? I've heard rumors that
For West LA?
yeah, that there's like one patrol car for Palisades, Brentwood, etc. Is that true? Or
We have 7 basic cars for the West LA area, but then our day shift starts at 5:15, so we usually put out 7 2-man cars, and then sometimes we have maybe an extra. So say if we're really full, we have 8. Then we have a mid shift. That's a 12-hour shift. That ends at 5:15 in the evening. Then we have a shift that starts at 10 o'clock. That will have 2 more additional units. Sometimes you may get lucky and get 3. Then at 3:45, we have another 10-hour shift of 2 more units. So, you know, you got 4, you have 11 units technically that could be out there. And then the morning watch shift starts at 5:15. They're in roll call, so they're out on the street at 6 o'clock at night. So you have the 2 shift at mid shifts, and they'll cover the busier time for the night watch shifts. And then at around, I'd say 1 o'clock in the morning, the calls for service start to drop off. But the thing is, if there's a major incident in West LA and if there's, not that it happens all the time, but if there's a perimeter or something, you may have 6 basic cars all working on, say it's a burglary suspect and they have a huge perimeter. Then what's going to happen is you still get the calls for service. Then we have to start pulling units from Pacific Division. So, I mean, it'd be great if we could have, you know, people always from New York always say, oh, we have 30,000 officers. They do, and it would be great if we had, I think we're somewhere around, it always varies, 10,000, but that's not all 10,000 just for patrol. That's detectives, captains, commanders, people working the Cadet Explorer programs. They're spread out everywhere.
It sounded like sort of 7 to 11 cars, depending upon the
Pretty much, I mean, yes.
What's the territory that group covers?
Well, it's West LA is 65 square miles for our station. So the Palisades, because they're so isolated where they're at, if they're short units, they try and, if you looked at the 64 square miles, if it was this table, you try and spread them out to the corners and then one in the middle. You try and, as best you can, evenly disperse out those cars to work that basic car. But what happens is, you know, when radio calls come out, if somebody gets an arrest, then the car from the Palisades may have to go all the way down to the Pico Robertson area. So
the eastern boundary is Beverly Hills, or?
Well, our boundaries are Mulholland on the north, Venice Boulevard. It's not Venice all the way down, but it's Venice is the southernmost portion we go, and then the Pacific Palisades, obviously, and then La Cienega. So my area that I had before this, well, I'm still working it until we get our new officer. I had the Pico Robertson area, so I had from La Cienega to Robertson, and then Cadillac to Gregory Way, which is the Beverly Hills border. It's a very small area compared to Brentwood, but you got to remember Brentwood has a lot of hilly area where it's not as densely populated. But I would love to have, it'd be great to run 20 police cars for West LA. It'd be fantastic. And I know when I worked the Palisades, they always wanted to have 2 or 3 cars because they know if an officer in the Palisades gets an arrest, they're out of play for 3 to 4 hours. It just depends. So, and I know our captains are always fighting, because what happens is when the crime numbers are low, which West LA, for the size of it is, the crime is extremely low compared to other divisions. So they look at the paper and they go, well, you know, your crime is exceptionally low. Good job with, they want to, you know, it's like a business. You want to do the best with the few amount of employees as you can. And I mean, the officers in West LA are doing a great job, but I'd always love to have, I'm sure the captains would love to have more officers. I'd like to have more motor officers to do traffic enforcement, because that's one of the biggest things is traffic. And the meeting prior to this, I knew when I came in, I had 3 people come up to me and they were telling me about all the traffic issues. And he's not a senior lead motor officer, but he's a problem-solving motor officer. So he goes to anybody west of the 405 freeway in West LA and he talks to the senior leads, and we get the complaints from the people and we let him know the problem areas that he could work on. And he does a good job, but if I had 10 of them, the traffic, you would see a lot less people driving crazy, because I get emails of people overtaking other people and, you know, not stopping at they don't stop at the stop sign in front of the police station, which boggles my mind. And I have to like take my life into my own hands as I walk from the station to across the street to get in my car. But yeah, 7 to 11 is basically a good number. Does anybody? And I do have handouts up here I can leave. It explains RYLAN right here a lot better than I butchered that. There's Jackie, who's the head of RYLAN, who you would actually contact when you get, you can always email her and ask her questions, but when you get that group of people that you feel like you're ready to do a RYLAN program, you can give her a call and she'll set up the time. You've been to one, so you know what she does. And she's, you know, I know she's getting overwhelmed, but she will get to you and set up the RYLAN. And then this is the emergency notification system. You can get on that if there's an emergency in the LA area. It will let you know what's going on with that. And then I just have another little handout for family disaster supply list. That's something that I got from Jackie to bring tonight. So, and just since I was at my other meeting, the crime year to date is down 2.6%. So I'm happy about that, because last year's number for the Brentwood area was really low crime numbers. So the next year you're fighting those good numbers, and even with that, we're still down 2.6%. So knock on wood, I hope we continue the year that way. And a lot of it's from the residents being more, you know, diligent and locking their doors, not leaving valuables in their cars. So I really appreciate everybody in the Brentwood area that's really helping us out.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, and welcome to Brentwood Park.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
That ends it. Thank you.